Hello, everyone. My name is Gilda Ross. I'm the Glenbard Student and Community Projects Coordinator. This is a conversation that I have been waiting for. I'm very proud of the pairings of the GPS Parent Series. This one is perfect. Dr. Susan David in conversation with Dr. Kristin Neff. This is one that we'll be proud of, we'll be listening to for many, many years to come. We've talked about today, we've been promoting the skills to help everyone thrive. There will be takeaways that parents can put to use immediately to benefit their family. We'll be talking about how to enhance self-compassion, and you will walk away changed. Not to put too much pressure on you ladies, but I know that's the case. So very quickly before we begin, I want to tell you about upcoming programs because I know you'll want to circle your calendar. For example, next week we are another good pairing, two authors. Their book is called This is Awkward. Dr. Karen Natterson and Vanessa Kroll-Bennett have written a book. Anyone who has a child in the throes of puberty cannot miss this program on the 23rd at noon and 7 p.m. And then the following week, we'll be talking with Trevor Muir. And don't call them soft skills when you talk to Trevor Muir. These are the skills that all children need to thrive now and particularly in careers of tomorrow. You won't want to miss that. April 28th, that's one is on the 7th at 7 p.m. only. Please, please, please join us in person for a very special event as we kick off Mental Health Awareness Month. May 1st, we will be hosting Jonathan Singer, an expert in the field of suicide. He is going to be talking with the community, and we've got a health fair, health resource fair at 6:15. Please spread the word. This is just a conversation everyone needs to be a part of. So you can see we're going to be busy. There's another event to finish out the year. A colleague of yours, Dr. David, Ron Ferguson, will be with us talking with those who work with young children, everyday principles to grow happy, healthy, and smart young people. That's on May 6th at noon and 7 p.m. We thank our sponsors who make this all possible. Most importantly, we thank you, the listeners, for the gift of your time. I'm aware of many, many watch parties going on in libraries and schools across the area, and I'm so a special welcome to all of you. It's also an honor for me to welcome one of our important board members, promotional partners, and that's Dr. Kathy Subber. She is the founder of Branch Moms, and those of you who know it, there are 100,000 individuals on this network. She's also the Director of Advanced Health in Naperville, and I am delighted that she can be here for this conversation. So, Dr. Kathy, take it away.
Thank you so much, Gilda. It's always a pleasure to be a part of your GPS series. It's important topics that parents, moms, humans need to know about. So thank you for having me be a part of it. It's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. So I'd like to start with Dr. Susan David, PhD. She is one of the world's leading management thinkers and an award-winning clinical psychologist. She has spent the past 2 decades studying how the way we navigate our emotions shapes everything that matter, our careers, our relationships, our health, and our happiness. Ooh, that's important, isn't it? Her #1 Wall Street Journal award-winning bestseller book, Emotional Agility, describes the psychological skills critical to thriving in times of complexity and change. Emotional Agility has been translated into 30 languages and is the winner of numerous accolades, including Amazon's Best Books of the Year award. Dr. David's TED Talk on emotional agility has been viewed by more than 10 million people, and she has addressed the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, Google, NASDAQ, and many other national and multinational organizations. She is a frequent contributor to the New York Times, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal, and has been a guest on national radio and television, and the GPS Parent Series now. She is on the faculty at Harvard Medical School and is a co-founder of the Institute of Coaching, which is a Harvard Medical School and McLean affiliate. Welcome.
Thank you.
Dr. David will be in conversation with Dr. Kristin Neff, who is an associate professor of educational psychology at the University of Texas in Austin. She is a pioneer in the field of self-compassion research, conducting the first empirical studies on self-compassion more than 20 years ago. She has been recognized as one of the most influential researchers in psychology worldwide. Kristin runs the Self-Compassion Community, an online learning platform where people can learn the skill of self-compassion with the help of others. She is the author of the best-selling books Self-Compassion and Fierce Self-Compassion, and her latest book is Mindful Self-Compassion for Burnout, which I know too well. So many of our mom members of the branch, I mean, all they're talking about is how exhausted they are. So thank you for talking on that important topic as well. We are delighted to welcome both of you to the GPS series today. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Hi, Susan.
Hello.
We just realized that we knew each other. We corresponded in the pandemic. I was on a podcast Susan was having. So, and our work overlaps so much. So I'm so excited to be talking to you and drawing out your wisdom, especially helping parents in this really kind of crazy time we're in right now with all the complexity. And so, I actually I reread your book, Emotional Agility, which is so great. And I rewatched your TED Talk, which is such a great TED Talk. And I think one of your real gifts is your ability to talk about these psychological issues of how we deal with emotions in a very easy, understandable way. And so you use the term emotional agility. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
So firstly, thank you for being in conversation with me today. And thank you to everyone who is joining. It's such an honor. I think there is so much going on in the world right now. And probably one of the most sacred responsibilities is the responsibility to help ourselves to navigate the reality and to help the people we love. So you asked me, Kristin, what do I mean by emotional agility? And I can give you a little bit of background as to how I came to this work. But the way that I think very simply of emotional agility is that it's the skills that are needed to help you to be a healthy human being. Very briefly. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that every day we and our children experience reality. The reality of rejection, of heartache, the reality of chaos, the reality of disappointment. Every single day, we experience emotions, the reality of joy, okay? And how we navigate these inner experiences drive every aspect then of our relationships and how we are able to step up in the world. For example, do we get hooked into the difficulty of an experience and let it slow us down and stop us and cause us to shrink as people? Or are we able to be compassionate with that experience, not ignore it, but be compassionate with it, reconnect with ourselves, and then re-step forward? These are critical skills. And I will just say, the introduction, this like, don't call these soft skills, that is true because every single person is talking about the human skills revolution, or the AI revolution. But the true revolution that is happening for every one of us is actually the human skills revolution. The ability as human beings to step into what can be challenging and difficult, to still maintain our sense of self and what matters, and to maintain our sanity and our well-being in a changing world. So long-winded and short-winded. The short-winded is they are the skills that are needed for us to be healthy.
Yeah, and I must say, I like the term emotional agility a little better than emotional intelligence. I mean, I love that work as well, but I love agility because it kind of creates a picture of like going through like an obstacle course and all these things are coming at us and how do we navigate them successfully. So it's a more active term as opposed to like I'm just born with it or not. I think that's great.
Yeah. I think that's really important. A lot of parents, a lot of teachers hear of the term emotional intelligence. And of course, emotional intelligence has very particular skills that are useful. It's like emotion regulation and understanding emotions. There are these terms that are important. Some key ways that emotional agility is purposefully distinct and really important is that, firstly, often when we think about emotional intelligence, and this is an area that I did my PhD in, we think about emotional control. You know, it's like if you can just control being not emotionally hijacked, if you can just control your emotions, you'll do better. Now, this is not true to the research.
Yeah.
What the research shows is that as soon as children are, and as soon as humans try to control, jump into fix, jump into minimize, or do away with their difficult emotions, actually there is what we call a rebound effect. The piece of cake in the refrigerator that you try not to think about because you're trying to be healthy is the very thing that you obsess about every time you go into the kitchen. And it's the same with emotions. When we try to control, what we are doing is we are starting to have an amplification effect. And also what we're doing is we aren't recognizing a simple truth, which is that our emotions are beautiful. Our emotions have evolved to help us to make sense of the world. If you feel a strong emotion, that strong emotion isn't bad. That strong emotion is actually telling you, signposting to you, hey, this is something that you care about, or this is something that your child cares about. So a huge distinction in my work and the traditional work on emotional intelligence is, number one, the idea that this is not about emotional control. This is actually about seeing emotions as beautiful and functional. And then a second core aspect is that emotional intelligence tends not to talk about values. You know, by definition, emotional intelligence, how can you problem solve with and about emotion? What's not really incorporated into most discussions about emotional intelligence is the idea that if emotions signpost our needs and our values, then the step that comes next is actually thinking about how can we move towards those needs and values? How can we have the conversations that are helpful with our needs and our values? How can we change the world around us so that we are stepping into our needs and our values? This is why I think these skills are so crucial for being healthy in a changing world. You know, Kristin, you spoke about being on a playground and there's all this stuff coming at you. And this is one of the ways that I think, and I'll share because it might be helpful, is I often think about emotional agility as the skills that you might think of if you're a gymnast. Okay, so you're a gymnast and there is the world going on around you. There are people in the stands and they are clapping and they are booing and there's all of this thing. And this is what our children are experiencing. Our children are experiencing social media, people telling them that they're good or not good, failing tests, more demands. Like there's all of the stuff that's going on in the stands. And then you've got the gymnast. And the gymnast is able to have a strong inner core, what I would think of as your values, your character, knowing who you are and what you want to be in the world. And the gymnast is able to make their moves, so they're not just standing still, they are able to make their moves, they are able to do what's important to them. And they are always able to find their way back to their balance, to their home, to themselves.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And like what came up for me when you were speaking, and also when I was just reading your book again, is, you know, the fact that our emotions are really they're processed unconsciously. We don't choose to have a particular emotion. It's like our subconscious is processing all this information. I love the playground metaphor or the social media metaphor. And so it's like processing it unconsciously, and then the emotion just pops up. We don't control it. We don't choose it. And yet most often, as you say, we get hooked by it. We become blended with it. And so we aren't consciously able to kind of say, I think you said in your book, you know, don't say I am angry. You know, the emotion of anger is arising. So we don't deny it. We acknowledge it. We value it, but we don't blend with it. And that gives us more consciousness to say, well, actually, I would really like to call this person a nasty name, but that's not who I am inside, right? So can you talk a little bit about conscious versus subconscious processing of emotions?
Well, So there are two aspects to this that I think are really important. The first is that very often in my work, people will say something like, gee, this emotion just popped out of the blue. Okay. I was in a meeting, something happened, and I am so outraged, and I don't know where it came from. And what's really interesting is that very often, not in all cases, but very often, the kinds of emotions that we hook into are actually patterned. They are patterned experiences.
Yes.
It is the fight we have had with our spouse 1,000 times.
Yeah.
That emotion did not come out the blue. You know, we could almost lay out the script that my partner said this, and now I got upset, and now I got defensive, and then I walked out the room, and like we could almost lay out the script. So a first aspect of this is that one of the reasons that we often think that emotions come out the blue is because we are living our lives so much in our heads. And we aren't living our lives as much in our bodies, in feeling the twinge of anxiety, the ache, the touch of loneliness, these like subtle experiences that we're starting to have, and instead we're rushing around in our world. So I think a really core aspect of being skilled in emotions is recognizing that so often these emotions that feel like they come out of the blue, if we slow down into ourselves, if we breathe a little into what's going on for us, if we just ask ourselves the question of, how am I? Like, how am I really? And we feel that, we can start connecting with some of these like beautiful signposts that exist within us. A second really important aspect to this is that when we experience strong emotions, we often do what you described, which is the term we use psychologically is fusion. Okay, there's that beautiful Viktor Frankl quote. This it's not really a quote by him. It's often ascribed to him, but it's the sentiment that he speaks to. You know, so Viktor Frankl, he's in the Nazi death camps, and he describes the sentiment of, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose. And in that choice lies our growth and our freedom. So let's think about this from emotional terms. When there is no space between stimulus and response, with emotions, it's what we call fusion. So let me give you some examples. Fusion is, someone said something to me at school, so I lashed out at them. Okay, there's no space between what I'm experiencing and what I'm doing. Fusion is, my husband started in on the finances, so I left the room. It's like this like automatic thing. Fusion is what happens when we in a meeting at work and we say something to ourselves like, I thought I was going to be undermined in the meeting, so I didn't contribute. So in other words, there's the stuff that goes on inside of us, and then there is the way we act in the world. And fusion is where there's no space between that. And what is it that we want in the space? What we want in the space is, number one, to your gorgeous, beautiful, and essential work. What we want is compassion, okay? Because it is hard to human right now, okay? So we want someone who's able to activate compassion, like, gee, I'm feeling a bit worried about this, and it's hard to be in a space where I'm being rejected or where I'm receiving this kind of information. So we want compassion. We want the ability in that space for our child to have the greatest, most powerful way of being in the world, which is being able to be in the world with their full self, meaning with the things that they care about, with their values, with their character, with what matters. So that's what we want in the space. And another thing that we want in the space is our ability to move forward, so we're not just navel gazing, we're not just stuck, we're not just hooked, but we can actually move forward towards what matters. So I'll quickly highlight here, because you spoke about one of the ways that we do this, you spoke to one of the strategies, and let me give you this example. So often when we experience difficult emotions, our language that we use is this language. And I would say this is like 99% of the time, this is what we do. We say, I am sad. I am angry. I am stressed. I am. Now, we do this automatically. It's of course, okay? We language in this way. But let's think about what I am actually means. What I am means is I am all of me. 100% of me is defined by sad, is defined by angry. So there is no space for values or anything else in that. It's like all of me 100%. Again, this is the definition of fusion. So a really powerful way that we can start prying some light into the stuckness that I feel is by languaging slightly differently around our emotions. And I'll give you an example. I am sad. All of me is sad. I'm feeling sad. Already when you just label what you're experiencing, it's a feeling, or I'm thinking I'm going to be undermined in the meeting. So automatically what you're doing here is you are moving from the I am all of me into this is a thought. This is a feeling. I'm feeling sad. Okay. What you're starting to do is you're starting to see the thing for what it is. It's a thought. It's a feeling. It's a story. It feels like it's fact, but it's not fact. It's not everything. It's not dictating you. It's not dictating who you are. It's not dictating your worth. I'm feeling. Now let's take this one step further. I'm noticing the feeling of, I'm noticing the urge to leave the room. I'm noticing. So this is really powerful. It's language is one of the most powerful ways that we start creating space between us and our experience. And I'll give you a quick just metaphor of this in case it's helpful to those that are listening. There is a cloud in the sky. And that cloud is a sad cloud. And you are the cloud. Okay? When you say, I am sad, you have made yourself into that sad cloud in the sky. But here's the thing. We've all had the experience of being the cloud. And we've also all had the experience of not letting stuff get to us, not letting it get to our skin. We've all had the ability to be wise when we've had difficult experiences. We've all had the ability to breathe into ourselves and access something that's new and powerful that allows us to come to that experience. And so what I'm describing here is a way of short-circuiting, of accessing more quickly, okay? Instead of I am sad, I'm noticing that I'm feeling sad. Because here's the thing. You are not the cloud. Your child is not the cloud. Your child is the sky. We as human beings are the sky. We have the ability to experience the world and experience our sadness, not pretending the cloud doesn't exist, and still choose who we want to be and how we want to act. We are not the cloud, we are the sky. And the strategy that I just shared is one way of many of how we start supporting this kind of skill set in ourselves and in our children.
Yeah, beautiful. And also, I'm glad you brought in self-compassion, because I did want to talk to you a little bit about that, since we overlap. So for people who don't know, my definition of self-compassion, if you just break down the word, passion is suffering, calm is with. So it's like, how are we with our suffering? So instead of, again, as you say, being fused with the suffering of the thought, the difficulty, it's we move away from what's happening, what we're feeling, what we're thinking, more to how am I relating to what am I thinking and feeling to this. And so in my model, I've got three elements. There's mindfulness, which is kind of what you were talking about. We aren't identified, nor are we avoiding and suppressing. We're kind, we're warm and supportive. But there's a third element that I think is really important, and I think is maybe in your work as well, but I'd be curious to ask you, and that's a sense of common humanity. Like the difference between self-pity and self-compassion is self-pity is poor me, and we kind of think like, we're very self-focused, whereas compassion by definition is connected. Oh, I've been there before. It's like all human beings have difficult emotions or failures or go through hard times. And so it's almost like with self-compassion, even though the word self is there, the sense of separate self is lessened. We feel more connected. And so I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about some of the differences maybe, or similarities between emotional agility and self-compassion, and particularly with regard to connection, which I think is so important.
Yeah, so self-compassion is a core part of being able to be emotionally agile.
Yes.
Because tough emotions are part of our contract with life.
Yeah.
We don't get to raise a family. We don't get to create a beautiful world. We don't get to have a meaningful career without tough emotions and the discomfort that comes with tough emotions. Like this is like written into. Sometimes people say, but I didn't ask for that contract. And I'm like, yes, but it is like, it is written into our contract that we will experience this. Okay. And so the way, and I think this is so much of our culture is hustle culture. So much of our culture says to us, it doesn't matter what you feel. It doesn't matter what other people feel. Like, just get on with it. Wake up at 4 a.m, like do all the, so much of our culture is a culture that teaches us to unsee ourselves, to unsee others, to unsee suffering. So much of our culture is a culture of doing rather than a culture of being. And so self-compassion is crucial, because if you ascribe to the, well, I've just got to ignore what I'm feeling and just get on with it, you are on the surest path to burnout, to low mental health, and to struggling to human in a changing world, including you will not be on an effective path to relationships and to things that feel gratifying in your world. There is a lot of research showing, for example, that people who consistently avoid emotion, they just don't go there. Like, I don't do emotions. Like, I am, just getting on with what's on my to-do list. That those people have worse relationships. They are worse leaders. They have lower levels of well-being. They are people who, when something goes wrong, they suddenly get laid off. They lose their jobs. They are more likely to completely decompensate because they're not practiced around emotions. They're not practiced with this contract. So, Kristin, in order for us to be able to access the discomfort, to be able to move towards our courage, to have difficult conversations, to do things that are important, like apply for a college that you might not get into. You need to have that courage, hold hands with kindness and the recognition of that component of yours, that component of humanity, that like this is part of a shared experience. And I'll share with you, I know you mentioned you'd watch my TED talk, but you know, the way I came to this work was because, well, many things, but one thread that was a defining thread in my life was being 15 years old. My father, who was 42, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He was brought home to die. A person who had always seen me. And in the space of my father being diagnosed and his death, our whole life fell apart. My mother was grieving the love of her life. She was raising 3 children. My father had not been able to keep his business. He had a small business going during his illness. The creditors were knocking. Our whole life fell apart. And I remember so clearly that he died on a Friday, Kristin, and on the Monday, my mom came to me and said, and she was just besides herself, and she was trying to do her best to keep us moving forward with moving forward. And she came and she said to me, Susie, you need to go to school. We need to keep things as normal as we can. I went to school that day, and not one person mentioned the word father in my presence, asked me how I was doing. There was a profound unseeing. I started to, and I'm sharing this with you because I know that there are parents on this call who are dealing in different ways, similar ways, with this human suffering. I started to use food to numb my pain. For me as a young child, I was 15, binging and purging, unable to bear the weight of my grief. And no one knew, not one person knew. I didn't drop a single grade. I was praised for being strong. And Kristin, then one day I went into class, and this is emotional agility. This is these skills. One day I went into class and there was a teacher who handed out blank notebooks. And she said, as she looked at me, but to the class, write, tell the truth, write like no one is reading. And I started a secret. I know there are teachers on this call today. You people are heroes. You are heroes in children's lives. This teacher and I started a silent correspondence where every day I would write about my grief and my pain and my loss. I would hand in this journal. She would write back to me. I would hand it in again. She would write back to me. And Kristin, what I realized, and this brings us to these principles of emotional agility, is what I realized is it wasn't the fix it, pretend, everything will be okay, the praise for being strong, the task list. It wasn't any of that that helped me to get through what I got through. Because I don't think I would be alive today if it were not for this teacher. What helped me was a couple of things, and these are the core principles of emotional agility. The first is that there was someone who was willing to see, not to judge, not to tell me that I shouldn't feel something, not to try fix, not to tell me that if only I wrote my homework down more consistently that my life would be okay, but someone who was willing to see. That is number one. How does this translate for parents? And there are different aspects to this story, but I'll kind of elevate some practical strategies. What this means is there is no emotion that our child feels that is wrong. Any emotion that a child feels is the emotion that the child is feeling. And there is a lot of research that shows that simply the ability, the willingness of another human being to be alongside another human being who is in pain de-escalates our challenge that we are experiencing. No need for fixing, no need for jumping out in, no need for judging. De-escalates, number one. Number two, there are some ways after the fact that we can help our children to make sense of their difficult emotions. And we can speak about what some of those are. And then we also know that the ability of us as parents and for us as educators to be able to help our children to elevate what's important to them, like who they are, what their values are, becomes really crucial. And I can give you some examples. But this is what this teacher did. What I realized is not only was she seeing me, but she was providing a space for me to see myself. What I realized is through the writing, I was moving into some of the skills that you've spoken about or that we've touched on a little bit, which is instead of being hooked in the difficult emotion, I was starting to make sense of it. I was starting to use language. I was starting to say, gee, this thing that I say is stress is actually grief. I was starting to, emotion granularity, understanding emotions more accurately is a superpower. I was starting in that journal to say to myself, this has happened to me and it sucks. Like, to your thing of human suffering, this sucks. Like, this is terrible. This is life-changing. And yet I started to recognize through that writing experience that I was resilient, that there were things that I learned about myself. There were things that I valued about my dad, my mom. This is powerful. So what I do in my work in emotional agility is I start to bring these core skills in very practical and powerful ways into capacities that we can work with our children, and in practical ways that we can parent not only our children, but also actually sometimes parent ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I love about this work, your work, my work. I also love that, you come from your personal story. I like to tell a lot of stories about raising my son, Rowan, who's, autistic and is doing well now, but had a lot of challenges when he was younger. And what you're talking about for parents and for those parents who are listening to this, is not only about helping your child directly by teaching them the skills, which is one way, but because of emotional resonance, which you know all about, Susan. So in other words, yes, because we have mirror neurons and we feel what other people are feeling unconsciously, you felt that teacher's compassion, even though she didn't necessarily say it explicitly. So if we're upset because we're going through a hard time, we're stressed, we're exhausted, or maybe we're upset because we're worried about her child, like me with Rowan, I was really worried about him. Instead of trying to give him compassion directly, I would give myself compassion. I would embody loving, connected presence, which is like the 3 components of self-compassion. And I would actually help him regulate his emotions, not directly, because if he was in a tantrum, I couldn't reach him directly, but indirectly. So can you talk a little bit about that, about how we deal with our own emotion actually impacts well, first of all, through modeling, but also through emotional resonance for the people, for our kids, people we're dealing with, colleagues, anyone, spouses?
Yes. Well, we all have had and we all know the experience of the opposite of what you describe, which is emotion contagion. Okay.
Right.
Emotion contagion. Anyone who's spent a day in an organization has experienced emotion contagion. It's like one person is stressed, everyone is stressed.
Yeah.
In fact, everyone is using this black and white label of how are you feeling? It's stressful. Like the whole organization is doing it. We saw this during the pandemic. We saw how everyone was, you know, the race for toilet paper. It was like there's this emotional and behavioral contagion that happens that is real, that affects culture, and that you can see scientifically. Now, the opposite of that is activated as well. That when we are connected with ourselves, when we say, gee, you know, I'm feeling like I have not a moment for myself. I am struggling, and I can connect with that in myself. And I'm able to, sometimes it's the tiniest tweaks. I'm able to just, you know, before I go into meeting after meeting, I do this, you know, which is true to work in compassion, which is that we are tactile human beings.
Yes.
And just, you know, if you're listening to this right now, please, you know, this is the thing. This is the I remind myself that I am of the earth, that I'm hugging myself. When I'm going onto a stage where I'm speaking in front of 5,000 people and I'm like anxious, feeling my feet on the ground reminds me. And so there's this ability that we have as human beings when we move away from judging ourselves. Oh, I should just be happy. I should be positive. There are lots of people who would give their eye teeth to have what. If we move away from the language of judgment into the language of acceptance. And what is acceptance? Acceptance is not passive resignation. Acceptance isn't, oh, well, there's nothing I can do about it. The world is terrible. There's nothing I can do. Acceptance is a willingness to show up calmly with truth to what is. This is what's going on for my child. This is what's going on for me. So if we can show up with acceptance, and we can couple that acceptance with kindness to ourselves, we automatically bring ourselves into a space of embodied groundedness, being centered. We become the gymnast. We become the gymnast. And it's much easier to, now I'm probably overdoing my metaphor here, so excuse me, but it's much easier to be in a routine as a gymnast with another human being when you as the gymnast are grounded in yourself. And so it is with our children. If I'm running around and my teenage son is shutting down, and I can see that he's starting to, for whatever reason, something's gone on at school, he's disconnected or he's lashing out a little bit more, the fusion, the lack of space between stimulus and response is the space that says, don't speak to me like that. Or, you know, if you could just do such and such. The space that feels embodied, the space that says that I feel what I feel, I'm not going to judge it, I'm going to be kind and accepting towards it, is the embodied capacity that allows me to go and put my arms around him. And even when he turns away from me and says, I'm just doing my homework, the ability for me to say, Baby, I'm here for you. Like, what do you need? Is what allows our children to then move into their own ability to self-regulate and to learn how to do it in the future.
Yeah. No, I love that. You know, sometimes parents think it's so selfish to think about your own emotions. If your kid's having such a hard time, it's like the biggest gift you could possibly give your kids to practice this for yourself.
Yeah, and sometimes it doesn't need to be complex as well. You know, sometimes it's also, I'm going for a walk and I'm listening to a piece of music that energizes me. It's like, you know, sometimes they're just these little moments of being able to connect with the self that then allow us. We can't see other people if we can't see ourselves.
Yes. Beautiful. So Gilda, I know you wanted to do did you want to do questions from the audience?
You know what, I just marvel at this conversation of these two important individuals and the melding of your work, how it's really coming together in this hour that we have. And I've written down some things that have really spoken to me and probably to others. I'm reading about that. Your idea about we are so wrong when we think that emotions are to be controlled, that it's our, if we control them, and it really leads us down this path where we shouldn't be fixing, we shouldn't be minimizing. And so how incongruous those two are. You know, certain reminders that will stay with me. There is no emotion that feels wrong. Certain mantras that a parent could go, there is no emotion that feels wrong. There's no emotion that feels wrong. And of course, Kristin, when I think of your work, our theme last year for all of our students was talk to yourself like someone you love. That's what guided us. Next year, it's let's all be better humans. You're helping us today to be better humans. So,
we need it.
Talk me through. I'm a parent, and I'm so disappointed in something my child has done. And of course, now I go to that place where I'm so disappointed in myself. And I remember so many things that you said, and you know, particularly that being the embody that loving presence. Help me in this moment. Go there.
Okay. Before we go there, I want to elevate what it is that I believe from an emotional perspective is our core role as parents. And of course, other than feeding and wiping bottoms when they're young, like what is the core thing that we're doing here, which is all of us have experienced a miracle. And the miracle that we've all experienced is in something actually incredibly mundane. You go to a restaurant and you see caregivers with an 18-month-old child, parents or caregivers with an 18-month-old child sitting in the restaurant. And the child does what children always do. They try, climb off the chair and run away and go and explore the restaurant. Okay. And something remarkable unfolds. The child gets off the chair, they run away from the parents, and then what they do is, and I know if everyone was live right now and I'd say to you, like, what does the child do? Everyone would say, the child, as they're running away from their parents, they look back. And what are they looking back to do? They're looking back to see that the parents or caregivers are still there. That if something goes wrong, that the parents or caregivers will be able to step in and be there. And then does the child go back to the table? No, it does not. What the child does is it runs away even more, exploring. Now, what I'm describing here is partly the work of John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, which described a core role of parenting as the ability to provide a secure base for children. The secure base is the knowledge that if something goes wrong, someone has my back. Someone has my back. Now, it is the essence of that knowledge that actually allows the child to do what the child's job is at that age, which is be curious, develop competence, learn, grow, and explore. The knowledge that I am safe allows me to do the things as a child. Now, think of this from an emotional perspective. What does being a secure base for your children look like emotionally? What it means is that the child is allowed to experience, enabled to experience all different emotions, emotions that they have and that are part of our contract with life, and that in that safe place, they can experience the emotions, and it's that experience that gives them practice with the emotions, that helps them to develop competence with the emotions, that helps them to realize that a day of sadness is not going to kill them, that helps them to develop strategies and skills, that helps them to understand who they are. This is the emotional work of the secure base of parents. So, to your response or to your question, when parents are, or when a child does something that evokes something in us, one of the most important ways to be is to be open to, number one, your experience of disappointment as a parent, to be able to label it and name it and see it and hold it and love it, to be your secure base, to also be the secure base of the child. Now, emotions are data. Emotions are data. They are not directives. Meaning, just because my son is upset with his baby sister doesn't mean he gets to give her away to the first stranger he sees in a shopping mall, okay? We own our emotions. They don't own us. So core ways of being with children is, regardless of the context, the disappointment or whatever the situation is number one, we're not judging emotions. We're showing up to them and we are accepting them for what they are. We also starting to move away from why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why did you do why? Which is from the place of judgment into the what. What made you? I'm wondering what led to your choice here. The reason this is so important is because why is from a place of control and judgment. It's basically saying, I have an expectation which you didn't abide by. What comes from a place of autonomy and curiosity. Okay? And what are we trying to elevate in our children? We cannot control when our child lets out the air of the principal's car tires. Okay? We're not going to be there for every break, for every turn. We can't be there at every moment. What we can help a child to do is to help them develop their sense of their narrative as to why something was important. And I'll give you just a very quick example of this. How much time do we have?
Go ahead.
Tell me 0. I was like, if you tell me 0, I'll be very quick. But if you tell me like 5, then that's brilliant. So let me give you a quick example of this. On my daughter's first day of elementary school, and I know we're dealing with older kids here, but on my daughter's first day of elementary school, she had been so excited to go to elementary school. And I had spoken about it all summer. And she arrived her first day of elementary school and walked in confidently and happy. And when I went to collect her that afternoon, she walked out and she was sobbing and crying. And the teacher came to me and said to me, Sophie and I had a very big disagreement at school today. Sophie yelled at me and she's extremely, extremely unhappy. Now, I'll just give you an example of where this goes. So the fixing is the judgy person who says, why did you yell at the teacher? You can't yell at teachers. Like, what? Okay. The what question is the question that says, you had a tough day at school. It's the one about compassion. It's the one about holding and showing up before trying to sense, make, and solve. It's the being there. It's what that teacher did with me. The later on what question is the question that allows it to transpire that my daughter had looked forward the whole summer to going to school, specifically because she loves her older brother, and her older brother had been talking up a particular play structure that was on the school playground. And that day, the first day of my daughter's school, where she was feeling anxious, she wanted to go and play with her older brother on the play structure. And this play structure is like, I would not climb on it because I would not feel safe. But the school had rules that elementary first graders were not allowed to go on this play structure because it was unsafe. Now, here's what was going on for my daughter. My daughter was, Mom, I own my body. Don't we tell our kids they own their bodies? She's like, I own my body. I am able to judge for myself whether I feel unsafe or not. I don't want to be controlled. There was all of the stuff that was going on for her. So anyway, the point of the conversation here is that we had later on an incredibly beautiful conversation about how the feelings she had, emotions are data, emotions signpost our needs and values. The feelings that she had on that day are feelings that pointed to two things. Number one, that autonomy is important to her. Being able to make choices about herself is really important. Number two, fairness is really important. She felt that what had happened was unfair. Now, as parents, you're always playing the long game, as we know. About 18 months later, my daughter came home from school incredibly upset about something that had happened to another child and said to me, Mom, the reason I'm so upset is because fairness is important to me. And I think that what happened to this child was unfair. So I'm not trying to elevate my parent, anything, because of course I stuff up constantly. But I'm kind to myself when I do it. But what I am trying to say is that when we create space and a sense of security in the child's emotional experience, and then when we're able to have the conversations about the what and how this signposts what's important to you, that becomes the child's character. That's the child's values, not what we tell them to believe. That's the child's character. That's the child's values. And one quick adjunct to this, someone recently said to me that they've got a daughter who is clinically depressed. And their daughter has struggled literally to get out of bed. And their daughter was invited on a hike. And the daughter said no. And then the daughter started saying, but actually one of the reasons I'm so sad is because I feel that there's a lack of, what's the point? I've got a lack of community. I don't even have friends, etc. And the beauty, the parent described in such a beautiful way, the conversation that they were able to have with the child about your sadness in this moment is sadness about friendship. And it's pointing to the idea that you have needs and values around friends. And so what are ways that you can step into the discomfort, the getting out of bed, the moving forward, the being in your life in ways that serve your values? So what we're starting to do is move away from this idea that you've just got to do something. And instead, our values are the guiding aspects of our capacity to be in discomfort. We're not just doing discomfort for discomfort's sake, but because it matters. That's what we're doing discomfort for.
Perfect. Excellent. Beautiful. Kathy, I know you've got a question.
Yes, thank you. This has been so wonderful. And you kind of magically answered two of my questions while you were answering Gilda's question. So that's wonderful. Because I want to add on with the teenage years. We have so many moms in our group that on our mom forum are posting regularly of I can't get my son to want to drive a car. I'm having a hard time having my daughter get up and go to work. And it's really challenging as a parent to know how hard are you pushing for kind of basic late teenage, we're kind of rolling into like tiptoeing into adulthood, when some kids struggle so hard. And if they also have some depression issues or some anger issues, trying to create that balance of, as a parent, just sitting back and saying, well, I'm not going to push you too hard versus I'm pushing you too hard. And then you worry about their mental health. I know that's such a large topic and I don't know how much time we have, but any strategies for
Yeah, yeah.
that?
I can describe this really, I can describe this very quickly as a principle, and then I'll give some backstory to it, which is human beings thrive. Like if you think about overcompetence, okay, what is overcompetence? Overcompetence is where we go out to dinner with our spouse and we know exactly what we're going to say at the meal. There's nothing new. There's nothing exciting there. We know what their opinion is of the movie and what they're going to order. That is overcompetence. Overcompetence is when you come to work and you can do your work with your eyes closed. Overcompetence is when you are, going through whatever your day is in a way that feels very comfortable and predictable, and, you're doing what you're doing. That is overcompetence. Human beings cannot thrive in the zone of overcompetence. We do not thrive, our relationships do not thrive in the zone of overcompetence. Overchallenge. Overchallenge. You never know where you are in the relationship. You walking on eggshells. Every day when you come to work, things are falling apart. You can never develop a sense of like how to ground yourself effectively because everything's changing. Human beings get overwhelmed and cannot thrive in over challenge. So we want, as human beings, as parents, always, 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 always to be working to the edge of our ability. So of course, as parents, every single situation is going to be different. Your child is going to be different. What that edge is going to look like is going to be different. We need to be moving towards the edge of our ability because that's what helps us to thrive and grow. Number two, so that's the core principles. But what does this look like? We need to be, as parents, autonomy supportive, meaning telling our child what to believe, what to do, how to do it, basically micromanaging our children's emotional world, as tempting as it is. Believe me, I've just had a child going through college applications. I hear 1,000%. But taking the long view, what does autonomy support mean? Autonomy support means wherever possible, giving a choice. Okay. Autonomy support also means that where there is no choice, that there is a solid values-based rationale. So do it because I'm your parent doesn't cut it. Hold hands when we cross the road because I'm your parent doesn't cut it. Hold hands when we cross the road because I'm bigger than you and cars can see me and they can't see you. And one of my jobs is to keep you safe, is the rationale does cut it. So where you can give a choice, give a choice. Where you can't give a choice for whatever reason, because it's not healthy, because it's not connected with your family's needs, then there is no choice, but there is a rationale. And we even then, there are sometimes uncomfortable emotions that come up with that. But we as a family can tolerate discomfort. Yeah. We can do that because we are the sky. We are the sky. We can tolerate discomfort and we can love ourselves through discomfort and we can be compassionate through the discomfort. So that's my, of course, every situation is different. And parents are, the best intuitors very often where that's at. I had a very interesting, and the circles back to self-compassion. I had a very interesting experience when when my daughter was very young, and she was 6 weeks old, and I took her to the doctor for her first shots. And it was actually my son, and my son went from this very enlivened, happy, gaga googly baby, and I handed him over to the doctor for his shots, which was something that was going to be done. There was not a choice involved in there from an autonomous, from my son's perspective. He was 6 weeks old, and he went from smiling and laughing into outraged, and he was crying and crying and crying and sobbing and scared. And I did what most often parents will do in this situation. I held him and I said to him, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. All right. So here's my son sobbing and sobbing and sobbing, and I'm saying, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And so gently, in a way that I will never forget, the nurse looked at me and she said to me, Susan, it's actually not okay. Your son's scared and your son's in pain. It's actually not okay. It will be okay, but it's actually not okay. And I came home and I was doing the non-Kristin Neff thing. I was beating myself up and I was saying, I've got a frigging PhD in this stuff. And I did the very first thing that you shouldn't do, which is to invalidate your child. And I was beating myself up and saying, I was terrible, and my son was scared and I'd overridden him and all this kind of thing. And my husband, who's a very kind of sardonic, dry, very funny doctor, came home from work, and I was massively hormonal. He walked in the front door. He was in his scrubs with his briefcase, put them down, and I, with a 6-week-old baby, handed him the baby and said to him, Anthony, today I was the worst mother. Noah was crying, Noah was scared, and I said to him, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And I completely invalidated him. I didn't shut to his emotions. And Anthony listened to me raging on, which is what I was doing. And then with this very sweet, wry smile, he looked at me and he said to me, Susie, it's okay. It's okay. And what he was doing was not minimizing me, but what he was saying is, take the long view. It's okay. It will be okay. You're doing the best you can. To every parent who's listening right now, the world is tough. You're doing the best you can.
Yeah.
Some of these will be helpful. Some of these strategies will be useful. Some won't.
Yeah.
But stay centered in yourself and in the long view, because it matters, and what you are doing just matters.
You just answered the last question that I had for you, but I'm going to throw this to Kristin really briefly. Someone has written, we are the sky. She's never going to forget that. Thanks, Abby. So here's this question for both of you, just really briefly. What's a simple phrase to say to ourselves in real time when we're having an interaction we notice we're not responding in that compassionate, emotionally agile way, as our concluding remarks? Kristin, let's take it to you first.
Yeah, love that.
I think I like to do what I call a self-compassion break, where you just bring in the 3 elements of self-compassion. The first is mindfulness. Just be aware, well, I'm hurting. This is hard. This is a difficult moment. Common humanity. I'm not alone. Most people would have a reaction like this. There's nothing wrong with me. So remember, that's not just you. And then some words of kindness. You just might think, what would I say to a really good friend who was in the same situation? And then say something like that. Research shows that 20 seconds a day of a little compassionate touch and a few words of support is enough to dramatically increase your well-being. So I don't care how busy you are, you have 20 seconds.
Beautiful. Speaking of 20 seconds, Dr. David, your answers take us home.
Very quick. Sawubona. Sawubona is a Zulu phrase. It means hello in Zulu in South Africa, where I come from. But Sawubona actually means I see you. And by seeing you, I bring you into being. That is the literal translation. Whenever I'm having a tough day, when I feel like my kids are having a tough day, I don't literally go around saying Sawubona to them, but I say to myself, Sawubona, I see you. It just brings me into myself. It brings me into them. It brings me into the moment.
I see you, Susan, David. I see you, Kristin, Kathy, all of you that gave us this gift of your time. Now it's on us to go out and do good in the world, and have with that self-compassion piece. Now that we have this important information, thank you so much. Just really grateful for this hour. I can't thank you enough, and the generosity of your time. Let's go hug the kids and tell them we love them. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It was a lot of fun, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
See you all next time.
Goodbye.
Thank you.